The latest Epstein document dump, supposedly the final one, lots of bold-faced names in there. Now, one of the biggest names from the latest release is Howard Lutnick, Trump's Commerce Secretary.
I met Jeffrey in 2011, so over a period of 3 years. I had a number of dinners with him.
The Department of Justice releasing its remaining documents from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Deputy Attorney General Todd Bland saying the records will be posted throughout the day, including more than 2,000 videos, more than 180,000 images. Some of the material so explicit you have to verify being an adult before you can actually access it.
Overnight, the survivors calling on 2 New York judges to provide emergency relief and shut down the Epstein Files website immediately.
In America, they say money talks. But in the world of Jeffrey Epstein, money didn't just talk, it silenced, it erased, and it bought the kind of immunity that even kings would envy. You've heard the rumors, you've seen the memes, but the terrifying reality isn't about who was on the island, it's about who paid for the fuel to get there. How does a college dropout with no degree and no clear business record become the private banker to billionaires, moving $400 million through the American banking system without triggering a single red flag? We are told the case is closed, yet as late as December 2020, the Department of Justice was still discovering millions of pages of hidden documents, proving this investigation is far from over tonight.
The Justice Department released nearly 30,000 more pages of documents related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, including many that reference President Donald Trump. What is in this latest release?
This is 30,000 more pages that were put up last night, taken down, and then reposted by the Justice Department. This includes photos, video surveillance, a lot of legal correspondence between different prosecuting areas that were prosecuting the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell case. There are a few pages of this that are fully redacted, no explanation why. There's also an email that mentions 10 co-conspirators that the FBI was discussing in 2019. That is some news that people have picked up on. And there's also a few mentions of President Trump.
We stop looking at the faces and start following the ledger, because while the man is dead, his money is still very much alive and moving through the veins of our economy. The first anomaly in the Epstein file isn't sexual, it's mathematical. Epstein lived the life of a billionaire, the townhouses, the island, the fleet of aircraft, but there is almost no paper trail explaining where the initial capital came from. He didn't run a hedge fund that was open to the public. He didn't invent a piece of technology. He was a financial bounty hunter who operated in the shadows of the world's largest institutions. We now know that major banks like JP Chase didn't just ignore his activities. They actively facilitated them, processing over $1 billion in transactions long after his initial conviction, a fact that was only fully exposed in late 2025.
According to the Times, JP Morgan processed more than 4,700 transactions, totaling more than $1.1 billion for Epstein, including payments to some of the women who were sexually trafficked. Why don't you start with that headline? How did JP Morgan enable the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, for many years, JP Morgan was basically the primary bank serving Epstein. And in the course of the 15 years that it worked with him, it did a number of things. And first and foremost, it set up accounts for not only him and his companies, but also quite a few of his victims who had been trafficked into the United States. And it arranged for Epstein to be able to pay those victims both in the US and in Eastern European countries and in Russia. The bank lent him money that was associated for projects associated with sex trafficking. It, in some cases, just paid him cash, millions of dollars of it over the years to thank him for some of the services he had provided the bank. And over again, when people within the bank raised red flags about how much cash Epstein was withdrawing.
The question you have to ask is not why they banked him, but what he had on them that made him too big to drop. To understand the source of this ghost fortune, we have to look at the man who gave Epstein the keys to the kingdom, Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret. In a move that baffled financial experts for decades, Wexner gave Epstein full power of attorney over his entire fortune, allowing a failed math teacher to buy and sell assets, borrow money, and sign checks on behalf of one of the richest men in Ohio. Survivors have since come forward, standing on the steps of the Capitol, alleging that it was Wexner's money that fueled the entire trafficking operation, a claim that has led to intense scrutiny, but a few answers.
Survivors of accused underage sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein pleaded with Congress to act, asking for full transparency and a full Epstein file release from the Justice Department.
If this Congress is serious about justice, then let this moment also affirm your commitment to provide victims with the legal aid they need to confront abusers.
A bipartisan group of House members has been pushing for the file release, led by Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna. The two are trying to force a floor vote from House members on a bill requiring the DOJ to release all Epstein-related files.
Was Epstein a financial genius making Wexner billions? Or was he something else entirely, a blackmail artist holding the purse strings of the elite? Then we have the Black Book. It's not just a list of names. It is a map of the Western world's power structure. For years, the media focused on the salacious details, but the real story is the spider web of influence that protected him. The recent unsealing of court documents has moved beyond just rumors, confirming that his network extended into the highest levels of the art world, academia, and government. With new names like former French Culture Minister Jack Lang surfacing in 2026, this wasn't a social club. It was an intelligence gathering operation. Every flight on the Lolita Express, every dinner at the Manhattan Mansion was a transaction. The currency wasn't dollars, it was leverage. But the money trail is only the foundation. The real architecture of the Epstein operation was built on something far more valuable to a global financier: information. For years, the intelligence asset theory was dismissed as a fringe conspiracy. With a massive 2026 unsealing of over 3.5 million, the Department of Justice documents has forced a re-evaluation of how Epstein really functioned. These files suggest he wasn't just a rogue criminal, but a man who bridged the world's most powerful intelligence circles. From the Silicon Valley elite to high-ranking Israeli officials like former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was recently caught and released emails discussing impressive visits to Epstein's island.
What does it mean when there are red flags? What were those red flags?
So, there was a range of red flags. The most obvious of them internally at the bank was that Epstein, he had hundreds of millions of dollars parked at the bank, but he was taking out so much money in cash on a regular basis that it was a real warning sign. And banks are kind of trained to be on the lookout for people that are regularly withdrawing huge sums of cash. And by huge sums, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars virtually every month. And this drew attention within the bank. And yet when it got escalated to higher ups, people looked the other way. And the reason it draws attention is that cash is a common currency for criminals. And sure enough, what we now know is that almost identical amounts of Epstein was taking out amounts of money that were almost identical to what we now know he was paying to young women and girls as part of a sex trafficking operation.
This connection isn't accidental. It traces back to the shadow of Robert Maxwell Ghislaine's father, and a suspected triple agent whose mysterious death in 1991 left a vacuum that many believe Epstein was recruited to fill. To an American audience, the idea of a honeypot operation is a Cold War relic, but on Little St. James it was modernized with high-tech surveillance. The mechanics of this operation were chillingly efficient. Recent 2026 investigative reports have detailed how the temple on the island was just a bizarre architectural choice, but the hub of a sophisticated server network designed to record every room in the main villa. We now know that cameras were hidden in the walls of his Manhattan mansion and his Palm Beach estate, capturing hours of compromat or compromising material on every visitor who walked through the door. This explains why, despite 30 victims being identified as early as 2008, federal prosecutor Alexander Acosta was reportedly told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to back off.
The House Oversight Committee released thousands of documents Tuesday night, including the missing minute video from outside of Epstein's prison cell on the night of his suicide. It led to conspiracy theories that he didn't actually kill himself, but the new clip provided no evidence of a plot or cover-up. Massie estimated 97% of the documents had already been publicly available, and they're not protecting the victims, but potentially the abusers and associates, according to Massie.
As of February 2026, the DOJ has finally begun releasing 180,000 of these images, many showing high-profile tech figures and politicians in compromised positions. Though many faces remain blurred to protect the investigation, this wasn't just about a man's dark desires. It was about the systematic collection of leverage to influence American foreign policy and global financial markets. But the money and the leverage lead us to the final, most haunting chapter of the Epstein story, the night the surveillance state went dark. On August 10th, 2019, inside the high-security Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, the man who knew too much reportedly took his own life. To a skeptical American public, the official story felt like a script from a poorly written thriller.
The position that a body was found in is a key piece of evidence in any death investigation. And in this case, we don't know how Jeffrey Epstein's body was found.
We still don't have that information. So if this was called a suicide without all that information, it was a premature judgment.
We were told that 2 cameras outside his cell malfunctioned simultaneously, that the guards assigned to watch him fell asleep and then falsified their logs, and that the suicide-proof cell somehow provided the means for his end. As of late 2025 and January 2026, new forensic reports released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act have reignited the fire, showing that the physical evidence in the cell was disturbed before the FBI arrived, with photos showing a disorganized, rifled-through scene that experts claim was never properly processed.
The doctor who performed the autopsy, while Dr. Michael Baden observed, came to the determination that it was inconclusive and they needed more evidence, more information. And then a couple days later, they changed that and determined that the cause of death was suicide by hanging. We reached out to the New York City Medical Examiner, but they would not speak to us, presumably because there's an ongoing investigation, but we haven't heard back from that office.
The skepticism isn't just an internet theory. It's rooted in medical anomalies that continue to baffle forensic pathologists. Dr. Michael Baden, who observed the autopsy on behalf of the family, has remained steadfast through 2026 that the multiple fractures in Epstein's neck, including a shattered hyoid bone, are far more consistent with homicidal strangulation than a suicidal hanging. This point was a central focus of the February 2nd, 2026 House Oversight Committee hearing, where lawmakers grilled officials on why the most high-profile prisoner in the world was taken off suicide watch just days before his death.
Jessica and Mike, the friendship between Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein started in the 1980s after Epstein started a wealth management company. For a time, the two were also neighbors in New Albany. During today's news conference, Epstein accuser Annie Farmer spoke with reporters. She recalled being just 16 when she was flown to Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, where she said she and her sister were assaulted. Farmer went on to say that many people knew about the abuse committed by Epstein and others. She also says a lot of people funded Epstein's lifestyle and looked the other way.
While Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel issued a joint statement in early 2026 maintaining the suicide ruling, the unsealing of 3.5 million pages of DOJ documents has only deepened the distrust. These documents, finally released in early 2026, contained thousands of unredacted emails and, most disturbingly, references to 2,000 videos that the public has yet to see. The fight for the truth has now moved into the halls of Congress, with figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton being subpoenaed to testify about their proximity to the financier's operation, a move that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The question remains, was Jeffrey Epstein's death the perfect storm of scoops, as William Barr once called it, or was it the final, necessary act of a network desperate to bury its secrets before they could be used in a court of law? The rabbit hole goes deeper, and in 2026 it finally led us to the doors of the White House and Buckingham Palace. If the money was the fuel and the blackmail was the engine, then the political firewall was the armor that kept this machine running for decades. For years we were told that the big names were just casual acquaintances, but the massive 3 million-page document dump released by the DOJ on January 30th, 2026 has shattered that defense forever. We now have the smoking gun emails, not just flight logs showing direct coordination between Epstein and the highest levels of global power. The most explosive revelation, the confirmation that Bill and Hillary Clinton, after years of denials, have finally agreed to testify before Congress as of February 3rd, 2026, a historic move that signals the protection racket is finally breaking down. This isn't just about a former president. It is about a systemic failure of American intelligence to stop a predator because he was useful to the state. And while Washington scrambles, the fallout has already claimed its first royal casualty. For years, Prince Andrew hid behind palace walls and legal settlements, but the February 2026 release of humiliating new photos showing the former royal in compromising positions weakened T-show on YouTube forced King Charles to finally act. On February 4th, 2026, the man once known as the Duke was quietly evicted from the royal lodge, stripped of his final dignities, and moved to a cottage on the Sandringham estate, effectively exiled by his own brother. This proves that no title, no matter how ancient, is immune to the evidence found in Epstein's safe. The question is no longer did they know. The question is now, what did they do to keep it quiet for so long? So where does this leave us? Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell's final appeal was rejected by the Supreme Court in late 2025. The main conspirators are gone or behind bars. But the system that created them, the banks that laundered the money, the intelligence agencies that looked the other way, they are all still intact. We have analyzed the flight logs, decoded the black book, and exposed the financial web, but this investigation is far from over. In fact, with the Clinton testimony scheduled for later this month and thousands of hours of footage still classified, we are just scratching the surface. This wasn't a ring of a few bad men. It was a global economy of influence, and we are going to dismantle it, piece by piece. If you want to see the unredacted documents for yourself, I've linked the full DOJ archive in the description below. We are investigative journalists and we don't just report the news. We hunt for the truth that they tried to bury. If you believe the public deserves to know the whole story, hit that like button, share this video to beat the algorithm, and subscribe, because in our next episode, we are going inside the shadow network of scientists and academics who took Epstein's money to fund the future of genetic engineering. You won't want to miss it. Stay vigilant.